All right, so we are going to do a quick lecture about the characteristics of life. So you just finished a lab about an Is It Alive lab, and we talked a little bit about the characteristics of life, but I want to give you more information about each of them. So by the end of this, you should be able to list and define the 7 characteristics of living things and also categorize things as living or non-living based on your observations. So really quickly, let's go ahead and start with this. Based on our activity today, I'd like you to go through and in your interactive notebook, just go ahead and tell me whether you think the following things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, number them down, and then tell me if you think they're living or not living, and tell me why or why not. Go ahead and pause the video and do that now. Okay, so we're going to do the same activity at the end, so just keep your answers. All right, so what makes something alive? We know that there are 1.2 million different types of living things on Earth. That means like different species. So all the different species we know 1.2 million different species on Earth. And we also estimate that we still have only discovered probably 1/6 of all living things on Earth. So that means there's another 8.6 million species that have not been discovered yet and exist on Earth right in front of us that we just don't see, or maybe are living deep in the jungle or under the ocean or all of those different things. So how do we know that things are alive? Well, there are 7 characteristics of living things. The first is that it consists of cells. The second is that it reproduces. Then it grows and develops. It obtains and uses energy. It responds to the environment. It adapts through natural selection. That's also known as evolution. And it maintains homeostasis or balance. So it consists of cells. So all organisms are made of cells. Organisms can either be multicellular or they can be unicellular. If they're multicellular, that means they're made of more than one cell. Examples would be us, humans, or plants or animals. In multicellular organisms, each cell performs certain functions. So you have lung cells, and your lung cells help you breathe. And you have heart cells, and your heart cells help your heart beat. And you have skin cells, and that covers your body. And you have cells that are in your eyeball that help you see. And you have brain cells that help you think. So all these different types of cells have different jobs within you. If you're a unicellular organism, which none of you are, but unicellular organisms is where the whole organism is only made up of one cell. Examples of this would be like bacteria, so like the things that get you sick a lot of the times. In unicellular organisms, basically every single function that the organism can do or the living thing can do has to be performed by this one cell. They don't have anyone else to help them. They have to be able to do it all within that single cell. Living things reproduce. So all living things have to reproduce. They have to have a way to make more copies of themselves, otherwise their species can't survive. So organisms can reproduce in one of 2 ways. They can either do sexual reproduction, which means they reproduce with a partner, and then their offspring have genes from both mom and dad. Examples of that would be like humans and animals, where you have a mom and a dad, and when they go through sexual reproduction, they produce a child that has genetics from both of themselves within their child. And they can also go through asexual, well, we can't, but other organisms can go through asexual reproduction. That would be without a partner, and that's basically where the offspring has only genetics from one single parent. Plants do this, bacteria do this, actually every single-celled organism pretty much does this. So basically, sexual reproduction is something which we'll get into when we do genetics and stuff like that. Sexual reproduction is advantageous because we get a lot of different variations of organisms. So that's why all of us humans don't look exactly alike, because all of us are combining in different ways and then producing offspring that are unique variations between ourselves and our partners. In an asexual, since you're only getting genetics from one thing, then you end up looking and behaving exactly like that other organism. Okay, organisms grow and develop. So every organism increases in size. You guys know this. So when multicellular organisms develop, so we all know that multicellular organisms develop from when an egg and a sperm are fertilized, and that's called a fertilized egg. And when that happens, that egg starts to divide and divide and divide and divide, and it keeps dividing over and over and over again. And as it divides, it grows. So it starts as a single cell and eventually will end up as you. So obviously it grows, and obviously you're not a single cell as big as you are, and so you develop. So all living things will go through that process of growing and developing. Even unicellular organisms grow and develop because they must grow in order to increase their size in order to prepare to reproduce, or sometimes split in half. Okay, it obtains and uses energy. So all organisms must get and use energy. All organisms need to build up and break down chemical compounds and to carry out life processes. So when you eat, your stomach has to break down that food so that you can get these chemical compounds for your cells to use. And when you break down chemical compounds, that's called catabolism. Now, you also have to be able to build up chemical compounds. So when you break your food down, it doesn't always turn into the stuff your body can use. So what happens is your cells will take in those little pieces from the breaking down of the food, and they'll build other molecules that they can use. And that is called anabolism. When you put together a summary of anabolism and catabolism, you get your metabolism. I'm sure you guys have heard, or at least it sounds familiar, the word metabolism, but that's the sum of all the reactions, the energy reactions in your body. So a living thing responds to the environment. So all living things must respond to environments, and you guys are going to be like, well, I don't think this works because plants don't respond to their environment, and actually they do. They very much do. So organisms can react to stimuli or things that they sense through light. If you've ever noticed that sunflowers, their flower will actually follow the sun across the sky. The head of the sunflower will just follow the sun across the sky. Temperature. The leaves know when to start falling off the tree based on temperature thresholds. Odor. This is more of an animal type sense, but they do respond. Sound, if you've ever heard of plants grow better when they're played music, there is some sort of scientific factualization to that. I'm not really sure what it is, but it could respond to sound. Gravity, this is definitely something that happens. This is how plants know that they're supposed to grow upward rather than downward when you plant a seed. The seed has to know, do I grow downward or do I grow upward or do I grow to the sides? Their ability to respond to the gravity on Earth tells them to grow upwards so that you can get a plant or a tree. Heat, water, so plants have to know that water is present in order to continue to grow, and air pressure, which is a similar thing as like gravity and water. It adapts through natural selection. So if you're a living thing, you have to adapt through natural selection. And this isn't each individual living thing, but this is your species of living things. So natural selection is the idea that the strongest will survive. So all organisms pass down traits to their offspring. We talked about this when we talked about reproduction. So some traits are good, and when they're good, they're going to increase the chance of survival to reproduction, to when you're able to reproduce, when you're old enough. And then some traits are not so good and will increase the chance of death before reproduction. Now, when you're thinking of natural selection, I don't necessarily want you to think of the human aspect of this, because we have so much technology and so much reasoning in our brain that we've kind of figured out a way around natural selection a little bit. But I'd like you to think of this in terms of animals, let's say lions. So some traits are good and will increase the chance of survival. So essentially, if a lion cub is really, really fast and can get to the food before his brothers and sisters, he's more likely to eat more of it and therefore be more healthy, and he'll grow faster and be healthier, and so therefore more likely to survive to when he's going to be old enough to have cubs. But there's also some traits that maybe a lion cub is born with some genetics that are slower. And when that happens, the lion cub can't get to the food as fast, and so it can't eat enough, and so maybe it just doesn't have enough food to really grow very big, and so then it can't impress his lady friends, and then they're not going to survive until they get to the reproductive age. So essentially the ones who are stronger are going to survive. So over time, the good traits will become more popular since only those that are strong enough will reproduce and pass on those genes. That's the idea of adaptation through natural selection. It maintains homeostasis. So all organisms must maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is basically balance. So a steady state of conditions that are necessary for life. So with humans, homeostasis is our ability to maintain our body temperature. You all know we have a body temperature of 98.6 degrees. And so our ability to keep that body temperature, no matter what the temperature is outside, is a part of homeostasis. Also our fluid volume. How do we know when we're dehydrated? How do we know when we've had too much water? Our body's ability to maintain that homeostasis is important. And pH balance. We talked about pH when we talked about our last lab that we did. So our ability to stay close to a pH of 7, remember that's the pH of water, that's a neutral pH, because if it gets too acidic or too basic, our cells can't survive. So maintaining a pH balance in our blood is really important. Okay, so based on those 7 that I just explained to you, I'd like you to practice and decide whether the following are living or not. Go ahead and pause it. Okay, so the aloe plant, what do you think, living or non-living? I'm hoping you said living, as it is a plant. It has cells. It can reproduce, meaning make baby aloe plants. It has genetics that it can pass down. It is able to maintain homeostasis. It's able to respond to its environment, meaning it knew to grow upwards through the soil using gravity. It's able to do all the things that all living things must be able to do. And remember, it's not living if it can't do all 7. All living things can do all 7 of those characteristics. I'm going to say this one more time because it's really important. If it can't do all 7 of those characteristics, all of them, then it is not considered living. And we'll give you some examples of that next week. But the aloe plant can do all 7 of those things. Yeast, which is what's used to bake bread, is actually a living thing, and it can do all 7. And a balloon, obviously not living. It's not made of cells. It has all sorts of things wrong with it. So that would be your example for it not to be living. Okay, so let's revisit that list you had at the beginning of class, and I'd like you to figure out, what do you think? Are they living or not living? So this right here is bacteria. This right here is a virus, a rock, a baby, a fossil of a bee, a fern, and an elephant. All right, so go ahead and do that, and then we will talk about them in class tomorrow. Thank you very much.